Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mr. B. Today we have a very exciting show for you. We are discussing the latest developments in the Iran war and other news around the world. So, without any further ado, let's jump right into it.
All this and more lined up, but first, the headlines. Russia says the United States is no longer an objective mediator to broker an end to the Ukraine war. There has been little progress to end the conflict. Kyiv has refused to give in to Moscow's demands. Russian President Vladimir Putin has also blasted Europe over its massive rearmament program. In the UK, two Labour lawmakers mull challenging Andy Burnham to become the next Prime Minister. Burnham is the overwhelming frontrunner to succeed outgoing leader Keir Starmer. He became eligible for the top job just last week after winning a parliamentary by-election. Europe reels under a severe heat wave. Britain, France, Italy, and Spain issue red alerts. Schools have been closed and railways have advised against travel. On Monday, France recorded its hottest night ever. 40 people have drowned in heat wave-related deaths in the last 5 days. Kenya halts preparations for a US-run Ebola quarantine facility. The country's health minister made this announcement after being held in contempt for ignoring a previous order. The US facility was announced back in May. Since then, deadly protests have taken place in Kenya. And long-awaited monsoon rain arrives in India's financial capital, Mumbai. This comes after weeks of blazing heat. Warnings of a potentially insufficient monsoon have raised alarm. So far, India has received 43%, less than the normal amount of rain.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete
The United States insists that the first round of US-Iran talks produced great progress. According to US Vice President J.D. Vance, the negotiations laid a very good foundation. But it is no secret that Vance and Donald Trump both are staring down a number of major challenges. Because nothing says great progress quite like announcing concessions that the other side immediately denies making. I'm talking about Iran's nuclear program. Today, Donald Trump claimed Iran has agreed to the highest level of nuclear inspections. A day earlier, his deputy, J.D. Vance, made the same claim, that Iran has agreed to inspections from the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA. It is the world's nuclear inspectorate. And according to Vance, Tehran will allow the IAEA to back into the country, while both sides pursue a broader regional ceasefire.
The Iranians have agreed to invite IAEA inspectors back into their country. That is a major milestone for the American people and the first step in permanently denuclearizing or permanently ending a nuclear weapons program in Iran. So yes, there was a little bit of threatening, there was a little bit of whining, but at the end of the day, the talks continued and we made great progress.
Now, Washington seems to have had a very productive conversation with itself. It seems, though, it forgot that negotiation requires at least two participants. And in this case, the other party immediately showed up to fact-check that claim. Within hours, Iran's foreign ministry publicly contradicted America's headline achievements. Tehran insisted it had made no new commitments whatsoever.
We have not had a meeting with the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, nor do we have any plans for an agency inspection of Iran's nuclear facilities that were damaged as a result of the military attack by the United States and the Zionist regime. Basically, there is no procedure at all in this regard.
Now that leaves the negotiations in a familiar position. Washington is describing progress, Tehran is describing misunderstandings, and we are left trying to determine whether a deal is actually taking shape or whether everyone is merely negotiating over the definition of the word agreement. Because even though negotiations are ongoing, it's hard to tell whether Donald Trump is trying to close a deal or working on the trailer for a war sequel.
If Iran doesn't live up to their agreement, or if they're not behaving, I will do what I have to do.
Does that give them leverage over you, Mr. President?
Say it?
Does that give them leverage, the Iranians leverage over you?
Oh, you're so leverage.
Speaking of leverage, Trump's answer here makes sense. Because with Iran, he managed another seemingly impossible feat, turning a situation where he held all the cards into one where he folded for less. After all the fireworks, Trump appears to have settled for terms that diplomacy could have delivered without the missiles, the headlines, or the risk of setting this region on fire. It was the geopolitical equivalent of kicking down a door only to ask if you could come in and negotiate. Because now Iran walks out with more money. It gets back billions of dollars worth of frozen assets, $12 billion to be exact. And although America says it dictates how that money will be used, Tehran disagrees. Today, Iran said only it can decide how the frozen assets will be used once they're unfrozen. Then there are sanctions on Iran's oil network, which have been temporarily lifted. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian is in Pakistan for further talks. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is also with him. Meanwhile, Tehran can now profit from its oil exports. When Donald Trump was asked about this, his answer was absurd. He managed to transform sanctions relief on Iranian oil into an infomercial for American agriculture. According to Trump, lifting sanctions won't really benefit Tehran. No, apparently the real winners will be American farmers because Iran is so desperate for food that every dollar from increased oil sales will boomerang straight back into the United States.
If the sanctions go out, money's going to be put into this country. All that money's coming back in the form of purchases of food, which they desperately need. They have 91 million people. They can't feed them. So the money that we lift is going to go to our farmers, largely to our farmers.
Now, politically, the war was an albatross from day one. Americans greeted it with less enthusiasm than any major U.S. conflict in modern history. A recent poll shows 78% of Americans prefer to end the war now, while just 22% wanted to hold out until Iran capitulates. Most Americans seem to think Trump simply did not understand what he was getting himself into. The last big lesson is that Americans are on the same page with Trump in a way. They just want the war to be over, a remarkable achievement in a country that once managed to sell the Iraq war as a quick errand 50 years ago. America left Vietnam to the communists and waited for the famous dominoes to fall. They didn't. 5 years ago, it left Afghanistan and discovered that not every bearded militant with a Kalashnikov belongs to the same organization. The Taliban took over, Al-Qaeda survived, ISIS remained a menace, and Washington got an expensive refresher course in the difference between its enemies. Each retreat produced the same awkward realization. Once the bill for war arrives, the threats that justified it suddenly look a lot less apocalyptic than advertised. It's remarkable how often existential dangers become regional nuisances the moment American troops stop fighting them. Iran belongs in that same category. It started with the US calling it an imminent apocalypse, but it might eventually be written off by Washington as complicated history.
Okay. I think that first segment there speaks to the fact that Trump bit off a bit more than he can actually chew. He went into that conflict without really counting the cost of what it would take to exit. And he's trying to spin it as many ways as he possibly can to make it appear as if there's successes there, but there isn't. There's no win. I mean, even if we pummel Iran, there's still the whole thing of not being able to actually control what Israel is doing. And if you can't control what Israel is doing, you're looked upon as not being as strong and as mighty as you try to make it seem. And they're controlling you and you're not actually doing anything to stop them. So, you know, it's just not a good thing. It's not a good look for him. It's not a good look for the U.S. as a whole. So let's continue.
The Strait of Hormuz is open again. Oil tankers are moving. Trump has said that American naval blockade on Iranian ports is over. The global energy markets are breathing a little easier. So you'd expect the case closed, right? But that's not quite what's happening right now. Because while the US president has declared the strait totally open, Iran is saying that the strait will never go back to its pre-war status. In fact, Iran's parliament speaker and chief negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, has said that the Strait of Hormuz will now be administered by Iran. So who is right? Is Hormuz really free now for international travel? Or is Iran wielding more control over one of the world's most important shipping choke points than ever before? Answering that question will be key in the coming few days, as this is what could determine the future of global energy flows and the price of oil itself. Allow me to explain. With US sanctions temporarily eased, Iran is moving fast, very fast. Tankers loaded with Iranian crude have started pouring out of the Gulf, and shipping traffic through Hormuz is surging. That is a clear signal that ship owners, traders, and energy companies now believe that immediate danger has passed. But then what comes next? Iran says it has agreed to keep Hormuz open, but under new conditions, Tehran wants a greater role in monitoring, regulating, and influencing traffic through Hormuz. Here's where things stand as of today. At least 37 commodity carriers transited the Strait of Hormuz on Monday, a record level since the start of the war in late February. That in itself represents nearly a third of normal peacetime traffic through the strait. Normally, the strait sees around a fifth of the world's oil and gas exports. But before the June 14th agreement between the United States and Iran, less than 10 commodity vessels went through the strait per day. Since June 15, the average rose to about 21, and over the last 5 days, it has reached 27. There's more. According to ship tracking data, about 6 million barrels are on 3 US sanctioned super tankers that entered the choke point early on Monday. They are all indicating they're going to waters off Singapore, where Iranian crude is known to be transferred onto ships that often deliver to China, which means Tehran is already cashing in on this reopening. And according to Trump, the rebound from Hormuz being open is even bigger than expected. Posting on Truth Social, Trump claimed that 19 million barrels of oil flowed through the Strait of Hormuz in a single day, calling it an all-time record. He said oil prices are falling and declared that the world is now a much safer place. But even as ships return to the strait, battle-hardened Iran is now starting to rewrite the rules of the game a little bit. Tehran has created a new authority for the strait, a new insurance system. And it is now asking ships to register under new Iranian rules. Not just that. Iran and Oman have announced that they will study the future administration of the Strait of Hormuz, including the costs that could be charged for services provided to ships using this waterway. In a joint statement, the two countries emphasized their sovereign rights over their territorial waters in the strait and said a joint working group will examine how navigation through Hormuz should be managed in the future. That does not mean a toll has been imposed, but it does suggest that discussions about fees, service charges, and new administrative rules are now officially on the table. Remember, until recently, or more specifically, before Trump started this war with Iran, ships passed through Hormuz without seeking Iran's permission and without having to pay any fee for it. Now, there are growing fears that Tehran is laying the groundwork to eventually charge ships for passage. That is why shipping experts fear that Hormuz could turn into the world's most expensive toll plaza. Because yes, while the United States and Iran are talking about the same strait, it does not mean they are on the same page on this deal. Iran is not interested in a return to the old status quo. It wants a bigger say over what happens in the Gulf. And so, if we were reading the tea leaves, the battle over Hormuz is far from over. The question is, who gets to write the rules of the world's most important energy choke point? The answer to that question will determine the oil markets around the world.
I got one challenge for you. Try Whisper Flow one time, and I promise you'll understand why I haven't.
Okay, so the last segment with regards to Iran charging a toll, it is true. Prior to this war and this conflict, ships were able to flow through freely. And now Iran wants to charge a toll. I don't think they're wrong. If somebody unfairly attacks you, damages your country, damages your infrastructure, and then you got to pick up the pieces, you have every right to raise that money somehow. You're right, especially if you're heavily sanctioned and by no fault of your own, you get attacked. You know, you got to fix the damage somehow. So, I mean, I think there should probably be some contingencies around, okay, you can charge tolls up until you reach a certain amount of money, so that you can fix all the infrastructure. So if there's $300 billion worth of damages, then you're essentially going to charge up to $300 billion of tolls. And then that fee should go away. That could be a potential approach they take, but I can understand why Iran will push for that particular point, and they're within their right to do so. Where it goes is neither here nor there, but I don't think Trump, cares. I mean, I think he just wants to get out of the situation. So that's probably one of the reasons why they set a time limit, 60 days, there will be no tolls charged. But after that, it's on the table. So we'll see if it stands, but they're definitely going to try it.
Now let's talk about the United Arab Emirates. The UAE is turning to India for its security needs. 2 weapons are on Abu Dhabi's radar. First is the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. Second is the Akash Tir air defense network. According to a Reuters report, the 2 countries are already in advanced stages of talks. Let me first tell you about the BrahMos. This is the world's fastest supersonic cruise missile. It travels at Mach 3, that is 3 times the speed of sound. It can be launched from land, sea, and air. The missile has a range of nearly 300 kilometers and an error margin less than 5 meters. Once launched, the missile does not need further inputs. That's why the BrahMos is called the fire and forget weapon. It hugs the terrains when it flies, making it difficult for radars to detect and track it. And because of its speed and its flight path, the missile is impossible to intercept. India has already shown its firepower to the world when the BrahMos struck deep inside Pakistan at will. That was during Operation Sindoor last year. Now let me tell you about the other system the UAE wants, the Akash Tir. This is India's air defense control and monitoring system. It can detect, track, and neutralize any aerial threat. Here's how it works. Imagine a web of air defense systems. This includes long-range missiles like the S-400, medium-range surface-to-air missiles, short-range interceptor missiles, and anti-aircraft guns. All of these are controlled by a master unit. The unit is called the Akash Tir. Once it identifies the type of aerial threat, it sends a message to an air defense unit, which can effectively intercept that target. So if a cheap drone poses a threat, the Akash Tir then issues a signal to fire cheap interceptors, like air defense guns. And if that threat is a ballistic missile or a fighter jet, the Akash Tir then activates more advanced systems. That would be the S-400. We saw the Akash Tir perform splendidly during Operation Sindoor. It was instrumental in defeating Pakistan's drones, missiles, and jets. And it allocated the exact weapon needed to beat the aerial threat. This is what smart warfare is all about, which is why the UAE wants to buy it from India. But this is not just a routine purchase. If anything, it is the opposite. For decades, the UAE only bought American-made weapons. The logic was simple. The United States promised its weapons along with security guarantees. So as long as the Gulf sold oil in US dollars, this situationship was going well for both the United States and the UAE. Until Donald Trump launched the war on Iran, leaving the UAE with 2 things: a bill worth billions of dollars and a reality check. During the conflict, the UAE was caught in the crossfire. Dubai was targeted with Iranian ballistic missiles, waves of drones, top-tier American equipment failed to intercept the threats. The UAE operates the US-made THAAD and the Patriot air defense systems, and the war brutally exposed them. First, they were too costly. Interceptor missiles worth millions of dollars had to be fired to shoot down these cheap drones. And second, they had major gaps in their air defense network. These American systems are designed to intercept ballistic missiles with a fixed trajectory. So they were blinded by Iran's long-range drones that can change their flight path. So the UAE realized it needs weapons that work. That is exactly where India is stepping in. But there is a deeper layer of strategic understanding here as well. In the last decade, ties between New Delhi and Abu Dhabi have grown exponentially. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the UAE's President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan call each other brothers. The two leaders have already met 3 times this year. The first was in January. The UAE's President flew to New Delhi for a meeting that lasted just a few hours, and he wasn't alone. He brought an entourage of ministers with him. Then in the month of May, Prime Minister Modi reciprocated. He flew to Abu Dhabi while tensions in West Asia were red hot. Prime Minister Modi condemned the attacks on the UAE. He then extended all possible cooperation.
यूएई पर हुए हमलों की हम कठोर निंदा करते हैं। यूएई को जिस तरह निशाना बनाया गया है, ये किसी भी रूप में स्वीकार्य नहीं है। भारत हर परिस्थिति में यूएई के साथ कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर खड़ा है और आगे भी खड़ा रहेगा। जल्द से जल्द शांति और स्थिरता की बहाली के लिए भारत हर संभव सहयोग देने के लिए तैयार है।
So that meeting led to 2 comprehensive agreements, one on energy and one defense. We're seeing that play out live. The UAE has agreed to store 30 million barrels of oil in India. This will be counted as New Delhi's strategic reserves.
These include agreements on enhancing UAE participation in Indian strategic petroleum reserves to a level of 30 million barrels.
And now we have the report on the UAE wanting Indian weapons. This is a major win for the two countries. The UAE knows it needs both offensive and defensive firepower. It no longer trusts the United States. It can't fully rely on China. Russia is busy defending itself against Ukrainian drones, and buying weapons from Israel would be a political nightmare. India is the natural choice. New Delhi won't lecture or put restrictions. And most importantly, the UAE and India have trusted each other for decades. In fact, until the late 1960s, the Indian rupee was a legal tender in the UAE. You could use it to shop in markets of Dubai. However, relations did take a backseat in 1973 when Egypt and Syria attacked Israel, triggering the Yom Kippur War. New Delhi stood firmly with the Gulf states. Then Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi pledged support to the Arab states. But instead of yielding stronger ties and goodwill, Arab states spiked crude oil prices by 300%. That price was paid by ordinary Indians. Fast forward to today, and the script has totally flipped. The UAE now is home to more than 4 million Indians. The two countries are working together on trade, finance, AI, energy. And now we're witnessing the highest level of alignment, which is defense. For the UAE, this deal is about securing its country from future aerial threats, and the BrahMos gives them that capability to deliver a crushing blow. For India, this is a step away from being the world's largest importer of weapons to an exporter. And by becoming the security guarantor of the UAE, New Delhi will shape the balance of power in West Asia for years to come. For nearly 8 decades, Pakistan has fed the world a steady and sly narrative that they have everything under control. But that mask isn't just slipping, it's being violently ripped off. And it is happening in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Thousands want the Pakistani army to leave the illegally occupied land.
Just to weigh in on the last story, this is another repercussion or fallout from the decision that Trump made to jump into war. A lot of the allies, Gulf states, are now seeing that maybe the United States oversold them on their protection. You know, a lot of the bases that were set up in their countries got demolished. A lot of their self-defense weaponry that they bought from the U.S. Was overly costly and probably didn't do as much as they expected to prevent some of the damage. And now they're seeing that the U.S.'s influence is not as strong. So now they're diversifying. Now you got to understand the Gulf states is what props up the U.S. currency. And so if the currency is, I don't know, supported by the petrodollar, and now they're starting to see, hey, we can, you know, our defense isn't really guaranteed. We might as well start to diversify what types of payments we accept from people who buy our oil. This completely puts the U.S. in a bad position on that front. So the mere fact that the UAE is buying weapons from India, you've seen Saudi Arabia cozy up to Pakistan, which is a nuclear country, for their protection in terms of weaponry and things of that nature and legions. You're seeing that the Gulf states are starting to move away from solely relying on the U.S. For their protection. And that is one of those intangible things that is the result of maybe poor decision-making by our leaders. It may seem like a small thing now, but that can continue to balloon out of proportion. So interesting to see what happens next.
They are calling out the army chief, Asim Munir. Chants of Munir out have been rampant, and this has been ongoing for more than 2 weeks. Global media, as usual, has shut its eyes, but the reality spells disaster. More than 50 civilians have been killed, thousands have been detained, and all lines of communication have been cut off. So why is there a revolt against Pakistan's army? Our next report is all the details.
What happens when you take away the rights of ordinary people at gunpoint, leaving them at your mercy for even the most basic necessities? The people fight back, and the Pakistani army is learning this lesson right now. Protests against the Pakistani army have been on the rise. This is happening in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, land that belongs to India that Pakistan illegally occupies. And it looks like the Pakistani army is losing control. In the last 3 weeks, Pakistan-occupied Kashmir has been burning. Thousands of civilians have taken to the streets, demanding,
I don't even know where to start. I feel like hiring a lawyer takes forever and costs a ton. I used to think the same thing. Like, getting a lawyer sounded expensive, confusing, and a whole extra project when you're already stressed.
Thousands are calling out and naming Pakistan's army chief, Asim Munir. Chants of Munir out have become a daily sight. Posters with slogans of Pakistani army killing innocents can be seen everywhere. The protests are happening in the cities of Rawalakot, Muzaffarabad and Mirpur, but the demonstrations are now spreading to Neelam Valley, Kotli, Dadial and Madhol. In every town and village, the sentiment is the same. The occupying Pakistani army needs to go. The protests are being led by the Joint Awami Action Committee. They have put forward 38 demands, but it largely boils down to 2 major betrayals by Islamabad. The first is the stealing of energy. Most of Pakistan's hydropower dams are built in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Yet, the region rarely gets electricity because it is normally diverted to the regions of Punjab and Sindh. Without power, the economy of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is in shambles. Inflation and unemployment are at all-time highs. Families are struggling to put food on the table for their children. And the second demand is on the stolen electoral rights. Out of the 45 assembly seats in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, 12 are strictly reserved for refugees. But the local Kashmiris can't vote on these 12 seats. And they pay the taxes that pay the salaries of these 12 representatives, who are largely from cities not in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, like Lahore, Karachi or Peshawar. But instead of listening to the protesters, Pakistan's army is doubling down on the oppression. More than 58 protesters have been killed. Hundreds have been severely wounded. Thousands have been locked up in jail cells. Internet has been cut off. millions of people are living their lives in a complete state of blackout. This is Islamabad's way of giving basic human rights, by keeping the people of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir under check with military action. But the protesters say they are determined to fight back. The Joint Awami Action Committee says that demonstrations will only intensify, and instead of listening to the demands, the Pakistani establishment has activated its favorite survival mechanism: blame India for everything. New Delhi has called out the baseless allegations and accused Islamabad of exploiting the people that live in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
The ongoing protests in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir are a direct consequence of Pakistan's decades-long policy of systemic economic exploitation, denial of fundamental rights, and administrative oppression in areas under its illegal occupation. The Pakistani state has responded with extreme police brutality, blocking of essential supplies and medicines, internet blackouts, and use of lethal force against unarmed civilians.
Pakistan continues to point fingers at India without any proof. But the truth is that Pakistan is a broken state. Its economy is on a permanent ventilator. The military is unable to control the people it has oppressed for decades. First, it was the Bengalis in East Pakistan. Then came the oppression of the Baloch in Balochistan and the Pashtuns in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Now it is the Kashmiris in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. By turning its guns on civilians demanding basic rights, the Pakistani army has proved once again that it is just an occupying force that is running out of options.
Okay, so that was the story on Pakistan and the potential conflict there. If you guys don't remember, earlier this, probably within the last 12 months, we were there. Pakistan and India was in a whole conflict with each other. That could have escalated because they're two nuclear powers. That could have escalated in someone pushing that button. There was a lot of threats. Luckily, Trump claims he played a part in, squashing that beef, if you will. And, the two countries did not continue to escalate the problem. But this is yet another thing to be considered, is that there's a lot of hot button areas around the world. Pakistan and India are two nuclear powered countries that don't really like each other. And they're constantly looking to undermine each other on the world stage. And they're ready to fight. And they have been fighting for years. So you have that. You have Taiwan and China potentially. You have North Korea and South Korea. You have also the Ukraine-Russia war, as well as NATO, who's trying to wage war against Russia. And so you have a bunch of hot button topics, and, we're essentially involved in two of them. You saw in an earlier story where Russia is no longer willing to sit down with U.S. officials as peace mediators because Trump recently went to the G7 and committed to help Zelensky through rearmament and things of that nature. Now, I thought that was interesting because Trump did praise Putin for not really getting involved in his affairs with Iran. Yet he goes to the G7 and gets, further reinforcement to Ukraine. Naturally, that's going to send a message, right? If we didn't meddle, this is from Russia's standpoint, if we didn't meddle with your affairs, why are you coming in and pledging support to somebody that we're fighting with? Again, not a wise move, but this is where Trump is kind of in a conundrum. I think Trump likes Putin and wants to keep things peaceful, but the people around Trump, what they call the neocons, they see Putin as a threat. So they're indirectly trying to pin Trump against Putin. And because, again, they want to keep this Cold War type of conflict between the two countries. And now it just prevents Trump from really being able to move the way he should in these type of conflict areas. So Again, I don't envy the position that the president found himself in. I encourage people to pray so that he has the wisdom to navigate the situation better. And, just to continue to see, where things go from here. That's it for me. Thank you guys for joining us today. Obviously, I like to do a good little mix of what's happening in the news, because these are the things that are affecting our day-to-day lives, from the price you pay for things to the gas, the energy price, to policies that's being passed, to the changing environment that we're existing in. So I think it's important to share the news. And one of the entities that I use is First Post. First Post is a news publication based out in India, and I believe they do a pretty good job of giving you unbiased reporting that really doesn't particularly cater to the Western narrative and talking points or to any other talking point. They essentially just kind of give it to you raw and down the middle. So that's one of the reasons I use them. So you guys definitely support their channel. Go check them out. And weigh in. If you're not already connected to this channel, like and subscribe, stay connected. But also, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. This is meant to, have conversation, because your point and your point of view matters. So weigh in. All right. That's it for me. Thanks again for joining us. And until we speak again, God bless.